The first thing you need to know about betrayal is that it sounds different than you'd expect. Not like a slap or a shout, more like the quiet click of a door closing behind you, followed by voices that weren't meant for your ears. I'm Drake Torrin, and I've been building things for 20 years. Houses, bridges, trust, all of it requiring the same careful attention to foundation and structure. What I learned that Tuesday evening in October was that some foundations crumble faster than others. I'd come home early from the Brookline construction site, my work boots still caked with mud, expecting to find Dalia preparing for another one of her PR firm's networking events. Instead, I found her in our kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, laughing in a way I hadn't heard in months. "Stefan, you're terrible," she was saying, her voice honey-sweet and conspiratorial. "Drake won't be home for hours. He's so predictable, always working late on Tuesdays." Stefan, my younger brother, the golden boy with the fancy gym and the flashy car. The one who'd always gotten everything handed to him while I scraped and clawed for every opportunity. I froze in the hallway, still holding my keys, as Dalia continued her conversation. "I know we agreed to wait, but I'm tired of pretending. Tired of acting like I'm happy with someone who thinks a romantic dinner is takeout Chinese and a Netflix subscription." Her laugh was sharp, cutting. "You're right. I deserve better. I deserve someone who actually cares about how they look, who has ambition beyond managing other people's construction projects." My hand tightened around my keys until the metal bit into my palm. "The lawyer says I can file next week. No-fault divorce, but with the right documentation, I can make sure I get the house, half his retirement, and enough alimony to start fresh. Drake's too nice to fight dirty. He'll probably just roll over and accept whatever I put in front of him. Too nice. Too predictable. Too boring." I stood there in my own hallway, listening to my wife of 8 years plan my destruction with surgical precision. But what came next was the part that really got to me. "I love you too, Stefan. I should have chosen you from the beginning instead of settling for your older brother. But we can fix that now, can't we?" The words hit me like a wrecking ball to the chest. Not just the affair, though that was plenty, but the casual cruelty of it. The assumption that I'd just accept whatever scraps they decided to throw me. I backed out of the house as quietly as I'd entered, my mind already spinning. Dalia wanted to play games? Fine, but she'd picked the wrong opponent. See, there's something about construction work that teaches you patience. You learn to plan 3 steps ahead, to anticipate problems before they happen, and most importantly, to build things that last. What Dalia didn't understand was that revenge, done properly, requires the same careful planning as any major project. I drove to Murphy's Tavern, a dive bar near the construction site where the workers went to complain about their day. Vic Kowalski was there, nursing a beer and scrolling through his phone. Ex-Boston PD, now working security for the construction company, Vic had become my closest friend over the past few years. He was also the only person I knew who understood the value of keeping his mouth shut and his eyes open. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," Vic said as I slid into the booth across from him. "Worse, someone's trying to steal my entire life." I told him everything, the phone call, the lawyer, the casual way Dalia had dismissed 8 years of marriage like it was a minor inconvenience. Vic listened without interrupting, his cop instinct still sharp despite being off the force for 3 years. "So what's the plan?" he asked when I finished. "Plan? Come on, Drake. I've seen you manage a crew of 30 guys, coordinate million-dollar projects, and solve problems that would make lesser men cry. You're telling me you're just going to roll over for this?" He was right, of course. I'd spent my entire adult life solving problems, and this was just another problem that needed solving. A more personal one, sure, but the principles were the same. Assess the situation, identify the weak points, and execute with precision. "I need information first," I said. "Timeline, documentation, evidence. Can't build anything without knowing what you're working with." Vic grinned. "Now you're talking. What do you need?" Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Over the next 2 hours, we outlined a strategy that would have made Sun Tzu proud. First, I needed to understand exactly what Dalia was planning. Second, I needed to protect my assets before she could get to them. Third, and most importantly, I needed to make sure that when this was over, everyone would know exactly who Dalia and Stefan really were. I went home that night and acted like nothing had happened. Dalia was in the living room, watching some reality TV show about rich housewives, looking perfectly innocent. She even smiled when I kissed her forehead, the same smile she'd probably been giving me for months while planning my downfall. "How was work, honey?" she asked, not looking away from the television. "Same old stuff. Foundation problems on the Brookline project, but we'll get it sorted out. Foundation problems. If only she knew. The next morning, I woke up at 5 a.m. and drove to the office of Patricia Henley, the best divorce attorney in Boston. Patricia was a shark in a power suit, known for representing high-profile clients and not losing. She was also expensive, but I figured it was worth the investment. "Mr. Torrin," she said, reviewing the notes I'd prepared overnight, "you're in a better position than you think. Massachusetts is a no-fault state, but if we can prove infidelity and financial planning to defraud a spouse, we can certainly influence the settlement. What do I need? Evidence, documentation, and most importantly, you need to act first. The spouse who files first often has a significant advantage, especially if they have done their homework. I spent the rest of the morning at the bank, setting up new accounts and transferring assets. Not hiding money, that would be illegal, but protecting what was rightfully mine. I also changed the passwords on all our shared accounts and credit cards. If Dalia wanted to fight, she'd have to fight fair. By noon, I was back at the construction site, acting like it was just another Wednesday. But inside, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the thrill of a challenge worth meeting. My phone buzzed around 2 p.m. A text from Stefan. "Family dinner Sunday. Mom's making her famous lasagna. Don't disappoint her by working late again." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Sunday dinner was going to be very interesting indeed. Sunday arrived with the kind of crisp October weather that makes Boston beautiful and dangerous at the same time. I dressed carefully, khakis, button-down shirt, the kind of outfit that said harmless older brother, while concealing the fact that I'd spent the week preparing for war. My parents lived in a modest 2-story house in Southie, the same neighborhood where Stefan and I had grown up throwing rocks at street lamps and pretending we were going to conquer the world. Dad was in the garage, tinkering with his ancient Buick, while Mom bustled around the kitchen in full Italian grandmother mode. "Drake!" she called out as I walked through the front door. "You're early. Good boy. Your brother's already here with that lovely girlfriend of his." Lovely girlfriend. I wondered what Mom would think if she knew her lovely future daughter-in-law was currently married to her other son. I found Stefan in the living room, sprawled across Dad's favorite recliner like he owned the place. He'd always been the prettier one. Gym-built muscles, perfect teeth, hair that looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Everything about him screamed success, from his designer jeans to his Rolex Submariner. "Drake, there's my big brother," he said, jumping up to give me one of those aggressive bear hugs that guys use to establish dominance. "How's the construction business? Still playing in the dirt?" "Someone has to build the buildings where people like you work out," I replied, keeping my voice light. "Speaking of which, how's the gym? Membership still growing?" Something flickered across his face. Too quick for most people to catch, but I'd been watching Stefan lie since we were kids. "Business is great. Actually thinking about expanding, opening a second location." "Interesting. In my experience, people only talked about expanding when they were either wildly successful or desperately trying to appear successful." Given Stefan's history with money management, I suspected the latter. Dalia arrived 20 minutes later, looking stunning in a way that seemed calculated to remind everyone what Stefan had won and what I was losing. She kissed my cheek like the devoted wife, then spent the rest of the afternoon finding excuses to touch Stefan's arm, laugh at his jokes, and generally act like a woman in love with the wrong man. Mom, bless her heart, didn't notice a thing. Dad, on the other hand, kept giving me looks across the dinner table, the kind of looks that said he'd raised 2 sons and knew when something was wrong. The breaking point came during dessert. Dalia was telling some story about her PR firm's latest client, gesturing with her wine glass and playing to her audience of one. Stefan was eating it up, leaning forward with that predatory smile he'd perfected in high school. "You know," Dalia said, her voice slightly slurred from the wine, "I've been thinking about making some changes in my life. Big changes. Sometimes you have to be brave enough to go after what you really want, even if it means disappointing people." She looked directly at me when she said it, her eyes bright with malicious joy. This was her idea of subtlety, dropping hints about our impending divorce in front of my parents while flirting with my brother. "That's very philosophical, honey," I said, raising my own wine glass. "Here's to getting exactly what we deserve." I caught Stefan's eye as I said it, and for just a moment his confident mask slipped. He knew that I knew. The question was what he planned to do about it. After dinner, I helped Mom with the dishes while Dalia and Stefan sat on the back porch, their heads close together in what they probably thought was intimate conversation. Through the kitchen window, I could see Stefan's hand resting on Dalia's knee, her fingers playing with the collar of his shirt. "Your wife seems different lately," Mom said quietly, scrubbing a plate with more force than necessary. Different how? Happier, maybe, but not happy with you, if you understand what I mean. I understood perfectly. Mom might be old-fashioned, but she wasn't stupid. She'd probably figured out more than she was letting on. People change, Mom. Sometimes they grow apart. She nodded, but her expression was troubled. Your father and I, we've been married 43 years. You know what I learned? Marriage isn't about being happy all the time. It's about choosing the same person every day, even when they're not making you happy. What if they stop choosing you back? Mom dried her hands on her apron and turned to face me fully. Then you figure out what kind of man you want to be when it's over. I drove home that night with those words echoing in my head. What kind of man did I want to be when this was over? The answer came to me as I pulled into my driveway. I wanted to be the kind of man who didn't get played for a fool twice. Monday morning, I implemented phase 2 of my plan. Instead of going to the construction site, I drove to Stefan's gym, a trendy place in Back Bay called Elite Fitness that catered to young professionals with more money than sense. The parking lot was full of expensive cars, and the interior looked like something out of a fitness magazine. Stefan was in his office, a glass-walled space that allowed him to survey his kingdom while pretending to work. He looked surprised to see me, but quickly covered it with his trademark smile. Drake, what brings you to my temple of physical perfection? Finally ready to get in shape? Actually, I wanted to talk to you about Dalia. The smile faltered for just a moment. What about her? I know Stefan. I know everything. He leaned back in his chair, studying my face. Then, slowly, his expression changed. The fake friendliness disappeared, replaced by something harder and more honest. How long have you known? Does it matter? I suppose not. He stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the gym floor. So what now? You going to take a swing at me? 'Cause a scene? Nothing that dramatic. I just wanted you to know that I know, and that what happens next is entirely up to you and Dalia. Stefan turned back to me, his face twisted with something that might have been guilt or might have been annoyance. Look, Drake, I didn't plan for this to happen. It just did. Right. These things just happen, like gravity. Don't be sarcastic. It doesn't suit you. A lot of things don't suit me, apparently, like my wife, for instance. We stared at each other across his office, two brothers who'd spent 38 and 35 years, respectively, learning how to hurt each other in precisely the right ways. She's going to leave you anyway, Stefan said finally. With or without me. You have to know that. Maybe, but the question is whether she's going to leave me broke and humiliated, or whether she's going to leave me with my dignity intact. What do you want, Drake? I want you to remember that I gave you a chance to do the right thing. I left him standing in his glass office, probably wondering what I meant by that. He'd figure it out soon enough. The next morning, Dalia found the divorce papers on the kitchen counter next to her coffee cup. I'd had Patricia serve them early before Dalia could implement whatever legal strategy she'd been planning with her own attorney. I was upstairs getting dressed when I heard her scream, Drake, get down here right now. I took my time, adjusting my tie and checking my appearance in the mirror. When I finally made it to the kitchen, Dalia was standing in her bathrobe, holding the papers like they were covered in poison. What is this? She demanded. Divorce papers. I thought that was what you wanted. Her face went through several interesting color changes. You can't just file for divorce without discussing it with me first. Why not? You discussed it with Stefan. That stopped her cold. For a moment, she looked genuinely shocked. Not angry, not defensive, just surprised that I'd found out. Drake, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You're good at explaining things. But I don't think I need to hear it. She set the papers down on the counter, her hands shaking slightly. This isn't how I wanted this to happen. How did you want it to happen? With me finding out after you'd already cleaned out our accounts and moved in with my brother? It's not like that. Then what is it like, Dalia? Help me understand. She looked at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much damage control she needed to do. I haven't been happy for a long time, she said finally. So you decided to cheat with my brother instead of talking to me about it. It's more complicated than that. Actually, it's pretty simple. You wanted out of our marriage, and you wanted to make sure you got paid for the privilege. The only thing that went wrong was that I found out before you could execute your plan. I picked up my briefcase and headed for the door, leaving her standing in the kitchen with the divorce papers and the ruins of whatever strategy she'd been planning. Drake, wait. I turned back to her, and for just a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married, vulnerable, uncertain, almost human. We can work this out, she said. We can go to counseling, figure out what went wrong, fix it. Some things can't be fixed, Dalia. Some things, once they're broken, stay broken. I left her standing there and drove to work, feeling lighter than I had in months. Phase 2 was complete. Now came the really interesting part. The thing about small communities, and Boston's professional circles are smaller than you'd think, is that information travels fast. By Wednesday afternoon, half the city knew that Drake and Dalia Torrin were getting divorced. By Thursday, the rumors about why had started spreading like wildfire. I didn't start the rumors. I didn't have to. Dalia did it herself. She showed up at my construction site Thursday morning, driving her BMW like she was auditioning for a car commercial. The work crew stopped what they were doing to watch her navigate the muddy lot in her designer heels, always a mistake at a construction site. "Drake," she called out, waving her hand like she was hailing a taxi. "We need to talk." Every worker on the site turned to look at me. These were good guys, union men who'd been building Boston for decades. But they were also human beings who enjoyed a little drama with their coffee breaks. I walked over to her car, keeping my expression neutral. "What can I do for you, Dalia?" "Don't be like this. Don't be cold and distant. That's not who you are. Apparently you know who I am better than I do. After all, you've been explaining it to Stefan for months." She flinched at that, glancing around at the workers who were pretending not to listen while hanging on every word. "Can we please discuss this in private?" "This is as private as it gets. You came to my workplace uninvited. If you wanted privacy, you should have stayed home." "Fine." She stepped closer, lowering her voice, but not quite enough. "I made a mistake. A stupid, terrible mistake. But that doesn't mean we have to throw away 8 years of marriage. You threw it away. I'm just cleaning up the mess. It was never supposed to go this far. Stefan and I, we were just talking, and things got complicated, and you decided to hire a lawyer and plan my financial destruction. Very complicated indeed." The look of shock on her face was almost worth the price of admission. She hadn't expected me to know about the lawyer, the strategy sessions, the careful planning that had gone into my downfall. "How did you know about your meetings with Patricia Morrison? The same way I know about your plans to claim I was emotionally abusive, financially controlling, and probably cheating on you with my secretary. Did I miss anything?" One of the workers, Jimmy Torino, a guy who'd been laying bricks since before I was born, actually started laughing. Not loudly, but enough that Dalia heard it and turned red. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," she said. "I'm making it exactly as hard as it needs to be. You wanted a divorce? Congratulations, you're getting one. You wanted to play games? Well, I learned a few games of my own." She stood there for a moment, looking like she wanted to say something else, then turned on her heel and marched back to her car. The BMW's tires spun in the mud as she drove away, spraying dirt across the construction equipment. Jimmy Torino walked over, shaking his head. "That's a woman with problems, boss. That's a woman who's about to have more problems." By Friday, the story had evolved. According to the version making the rounds at Dalia's PR firm, I was a controlling husband who'd become abusive when she tried to leave me. According to the version circulating at Stefan's gym, I was a jealous brother who couldn't handle the fact that Dalia preferred the younger, more successful sibling. Both versions had the same problem. They weren't true, and I had evidence to prove it. Saturday morning, I threw a party. Not a big party, just 15 or 20 people, carefully selected from our mutual social circle. The kind of people who would spread the story to exactly the right ears in exactly the right way. I called it a pre-divorce celebration and promised good food, better drinks, and some surprising entertainment. Vic helped me set up the backyard, stringing lights and arranging chairs like we were planning a barbecue instead of a public execution. Patricia Henley had advised against it. "Never air your dirty laundry in public," she'd said, "but sometimes dirty laundry needs airing." The guests started arriving around 7 p.m. Tom and Jennifer Walsh from down the street, Mike and Lisa Chen from Dalia's book club, a few guys from work, a couple of Dalia's former friends who'd grown tired of her constant drama, and even Mrs. Kowalski from next door, who'd never liked Dalia but had always been polite about it. I waited until everyone had a drink and the conversation was flowing, then stood up and tapped my beer bottle with a knife. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "I know this is unusual. Most people don't throw parties to celebrate the end of their marriage, but I wanted to share something with all of you before the rumors get completely out of hand." The backyard went quiet. This was the moment they'd all come for, even if they wouldn't admit it. As most of you know, Dalia and I are getting divorced. What you might not know is why. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the portable speaker I'd set up earlier. I thought you might like to hear it in her own words. I played the recording I'd made that first Tuesday evening. Dalia's voice, crystal clear, explaining her plans to my brother. The part about me being too boring, too predictable, too nice to fight back. The part about the lawyer and the strategy to take me for everything I was worth. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Jennifer Walsh started laughing. Not mean laughter. The kind of laughter that comes when someone finally tells the truth about something everyone already suspected. "Oh my God," she said. "I knew it. I knew there was something going on with her and Stefan. The way she looked at him at your birthday party last year, I told Tom something was off." Tom nodded. "She always seemed like she thought she was too good for this neighborhood. Too good for all of us, really." The conversation exploded from there. Stories I'd never heard, observations I'd never considered, a complete character assassination performed by people who'd been Dalia's friends and neighbors for years. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd noticed her sense of entitlement, her casual cruelty, her habit of treating service workers like they were invisible. Mrs. Kowalski, who rarely spoke above a whisper, actually raised her voice. "That woman borrowed my good serving platter 3 months ago and never returned it. When I asked for it back, she claimed she didn't remember borrowing it, claimed I must be confused because of my age." "She told everyone at book club that Mike was having an affair," Lisa Chen added. "Completely made up, but she said it like she was concerned about me. Took me weeks to convince people it wasn't true." The stories kept coming, each one adding another layer to the picture of who Dalia really was when she thought no one was paying attention. By the time the party wound down around midnight, my soon-to-be ex-wife's reputation in the neighborhood was thoroughly destroyed, and more importantly, word was going to spread. These weren't just random people. They were connected to Dalia's work, her social circle, her entire carefully constructed public image. By Monday morning, everyone who mattered would know exactly what kind of person she was. Sunday morning, I got a call from Stefan. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded without preamble. "Having a party. It's a free country. You played a private conversation for a bunch of strangers. That's got to be illegal." "Actually, it's not. Massachusetts is a one-party consent state, which means I can record any conversation I'm legally entitled to hear. Since it took place in my house, on my phone line, I was legally entitled to hear it." Silence on the other end of the line. "Besides," I continued, "they weren't strangers. They were friends and neighbors, people who deserved to know the truth before Dalia started spreading her version of events. You're destroying her reputation." "I'm not destroying anything. I'm just making sure people have accurate information." "This isn't like you, Drake. You're not vindictive." "You're right. The old Drake wasn't vindictive. But the old Drake also didn't know his wife was planning to rob him blind while sleeping with his brother. People change, Stefan. You of all people should understand that." He hung up without saying goodbye. Monday morning brought the consequences I'd been expecting. Dalia's boss at the PR firm, a shark named Richard Castellano who'd built his reputation on managing celebrity scandals, called to discuss some concerns about her judgment and professionalism. Apparently, several of the firm's clients had heard about the party, the recording, and Dalia's plans to manipulate her divorce settlement. In the public relations business, your personal reputation is your professional reputation, and Dalia's was now in free fall. She lasted until Wednesday before showing up at my house again, this time without the designer clothes and confident attitude. She looked like she'd been crying, which was probably true, and desperate, which definitely was. "You've destroyed my life," she said when I opened the door. "I've revealed your life. There's a difference." "Richard fired me. Did you know that? 15 years with the company, and he fired me because of your little stunt." "He fired you because you demonstrated poor judgment and questionable ethics. The recording just provided evidence." She pushed past me into the living room, looking around like she was seeing it for the first time. "This was my home too, you know. I had a right to make decisions about my own life." "You had a right to ask for a divorce. You had a right to leave me for someone else. You didn't have a right to lie, cheat, and steal while doing it." "I never stole anything." "You planned to. That's close enough." She sat down on the couch. Our couch, the one we'd picked out together 3 years ago, and put her head in her hands. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "What do you want from me, Drake? What will it take to end this?" "I want you to disappear. I want you to take whatever settlement my lawyer offers, sign the papers, and start your new life somewhere else, preferably somewhere far from here. And if I don't, then this gets worse. Much worse." She looked up at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in her eyes before. Fear. "How much worse?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You really don't want to find out." Dalia, as it turned out, really did want to find out. Tuesday morning, I woke up to find 2 police officers standing on my front porch. Detective Maria Santos and Officer Jim Bradley, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "Mr. Torrin?" Detective Santos was a compact woman in her 40s, with intelligent eyes, and the kind of no-nonsense attitude that came from dealing with Boston's finest citizens on a daily basis. We need to ask you some questions about a domestic incident report filed by your wife. I invited them in, offered coffee, and listened while Detective Santos read from her notes. According to Dalia's statement, I had become increasingly aggressive and controlling since learning about her relationship with Stefan. I had threatened her physically, destroyed her personal property, and used intimidation tactics to prevent her from leaving the marriage. The recording I'd played at the party was presented as evidence of my obsessive surveillance of her private conversations. The divorce papers were described as financial abuse designed to leave her homeless and penniless. Even the party itself was twisted into something sinister, a public humiliation ritual intended to destroy her reputation and career. These are serious allegations, Mr. Torrin, Detective Santos said when she finished reading. Do you want to respond to any of them? All of them, I said. But first, can I ask you something? Did Mrs. Torrin provide any evidence to support these claims? Photos of damaged property, medical records, witnesses to these alleged threats? Detective Santos and Officer Bradley exchanged glances. She said the abuse was primarily psychological and financial. I see, so no physical evidence, no witnesses, no documentation of any kind. That's not uncommon in domestic abuse cases, Officer Bradley said. Psychological abuse can be just as damaging as physical abuse. Absolutely true, I agreed, which is why I'm sure you'll want to see this. I pulled out my phone and showed them the text messages Dalia had sent me over the past week. Messages where she admitted to the affair, apologized for getting caught, and asked me to be reasonable about the settlement. Messages that painted a very different picture than the one in her police report. Then I showed them the security camera footage from my house, footage that proved Dalia had never been threatened, never had her property destroyed, and had actually been the one doing the threatening. This is from last Thursday, I said, fast-forwarding to the relevant section. You can see Mrs. Torrin arriving uninvited, letting herself in with her key, and going through my desk looking for financial documents. When I came home and asked her to leave, she threw a coffee mug at the wall and screamed that she was going to destroy me in court. Detective Santos watched the footage with the expression of someone who'd seen this particular movie too many times. Mr. Torrin, do you have an attorney? I do. You might want to call them. Making false statements to police is a crime, and if Mrs. Torrin has filed a fraudulent report... I understand, but I don't want to press charges. I just want this to end. After the police left, I called Patricia Henley and filled her in on the latest developments. She listened without interrupting, then sighed deeply. Drake, your wife is either very desperate or very stupid. Possibly both. Filing a false police report is a felony, and we have documentation that proves she's lying. What happens now? Now we go nuclear. I'm filing for an emergency hearing to address her fraudulent claims and request sanctions for abuse of the legal system. By the time I'm done with her, she'll be lucky to get the clothes on her back. The emergency hearing was scheduled for Friday morning in Suffolk County Family Court. I wore my best suit and arrived early, partly out of nervousness and partly because I wanted to see Dalia's reaction when she realized what was happening. She showed up 10 minutes before the hearing with a lawyer I didn't recognize, a young guy in an expensive suit who looked like he'd rather be defending tax evaders than handling messy divorces. They huddled in the hallway, whispering urgently, while Patricia organized her files with the calm efficiency of a surgeon preparing for a complicated operation. Judge Margaret Hennessy was a veteran of the family court system, known for her intolerance of games and her ability to cut through nonsense. She reviewed both sides' filings with the speed of someone who'd seen every possible variation of human stupidity. Mrs. Torrin, she said finally, you filed a police report alleging domestic abuse by your husband, is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. And Mr. Torrin, you deny these allegations? I do, Your Honor. I have evidence that the allegations are false. Judge Hennessy nodded to Patricia, who began presenting our case with methodical precision. The text messages, the security footage, the timeline that proved Dalia's story was impossible, and finally, the recording that started it all. Your Honor, Patricia said, Mrs. Torrin's police report claims that my client became abusive after discovering her affair. But as you can hear from this recording, she was already planning to leave him and take him for everything she could get. The abuse allegations are a desperate attempt to gain leverage in divorce proceedings. Dalia's lawyer tried to object, claiming the recording was obtained illegally, but Judge Hennessy shut him down quickly. Counselor, Massachusetts is a one-party consent state. If Mrs. Torrin didn't want her conversations recorded, she shouldn't have had them in Mr. Torrin's house using Mr. Torrin's phone line. The hearing lasted 2 hours. When it was over, Dalia's credibility was destroyed, her abuse allegations were dismissed, and she was facing potential criminal charges for filing a false police report. More importantly, the judge awarded me temporary custody of all marital assets pending the final divorce decree. "Mrs. Torrin," Judge Hennessy said as she prepared to leave the bench, "I strongly suggest you reconsider your approach to these proceedings. The court does not look kindly on attempts to manipulate the legal system, and your behavior today suggests a pattern of deception that could affect the final settlement." Dalia sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. She'd gambled everything on her ability to portray herself as the victim, and she'd lost spectacularly. In the hallway afterward, her lawyer pulled her aside for what looked like a very unpleasant conversation. I caught fragments of it as Patricia and I walked past, something about unrealistic expectations and damage control and taking whatever deal we can get. Patricia was practically glowing with professional satisfaction. "Drake, in 25 years of practicing family law, I've rarely seen someone destroy their own case so thoroughly. Your wife just handed us everything we could have asked for. What happens next? Next, we wait for her to realize she's beaten and come to us with a settlement offer. Based on what happened today, I'd say we'll hear from them by Monday." We heard from them by Saturday. Dalia called me directly, bypassing the lawyers, her voice small and defeated. "Drake, we need to talk. Talk to Patricia. She represents my interests now. Please, just 5 minutes, as two people who used to love each other." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop in Harvard Square, neutral territory, public enough to prevent any dramatic scenes. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth and staring into a cup of coffee like it held the answers to life's mysteries. She'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. "You've got 5 minutes. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, and I know I made things worse by lying to the police. But Drake, we were married for 8 years. That has to count for something." It counted for something. Past tense. "I'm asking for mercy. I'm asking you to remember the good times we had, the plans we made, the life we built together." I studied her face, looking for some sign of the woman I'd married. She was still beautiful, still capable of turning heads when she walked into a room. But something essential was missing. The spark that had made me fall in love with her in the first place. "What do you want, Dalia?" "I want us to settle this quietly, without destroying each other. I'll take whatever your lawyer thinks is fair. I just want to start over somewhere else." "What about Stefan?" Her face crumpled slightly. "Stefan and I, that's over. He made it clear that he's not interested in a relationship with someone who comes with legal problems and no money." I almost laughed. Of course, Stefan had abandoned her the moment things got difficult. That was his pattern. All charm and promises until the situation required actual commitment. "So now that your backup plan has fallen through, you want to negotiate." "I want to end this before we both lose everything." I finished my coffee and stood up. "Have your lawyer call Patricia on Monday. She'll present you with a settlement offer. I suggest you take it." "And if I don't?" "Then we go to trial, and a jury gets to hear all about your affair, your lies, and your attempt to manipulate the legal system. How do you think that's going to work out for you?" She didn't answer, but her expression told me everything I needed to know. Monday morning, Dalia's lawyer called Patricia with a settlement proposal that amounted to complete capitulation. She would take a small lump sum payment, waive all claims to alimony, and agree to a non-disclosure clause that prevented her from discussing our marriage publicly. In return, I would agree not to pursue criminal charges for the false police report. "It's a good deal, Drake," Patricia said. "Clean, simple, and it gets her out of your life permanently." What's the catch? No catch. She's beaten, and she knows it. Her lawyer probably told her that if this goes to trial, she could end up with nothing and facing jail time. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. Counteroffer. Same terms, but I want her out of Boston. The non-disclosure clause goes both ways, and if she ever contacts me again for any reason, the deal is void. Done. By Wednesday, the papers were signed, and my marriage was officially over. Dalia cleaned out her belongings while I was at work, leaving behind only a brief note that said, "I'm sorry," and the keys to the house. I found myself standing in my empty living room that evening, looking around at the space that had once been ours and was now just mine. The silence was profound, but it wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. My phone buzzed with a text from Vic. "How does it feel to be a free man?" I typed back, "Like I just finished a really difficult construction project." "Good analogy. What's next?" I looked around my house now, and smiled. Now I clean up the job site and move on to the next project. But even as I typed the words, I knew the job wasn't quite finished. There was still the matter of my dear brother Stefan and his role in the destruction of my marriage. Some debts, after all, require personal collection. 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, I got a call from my father. "Drake, we need to talk about your brother." I was at the construction site reviewing blueprints for a new office complex in Cambridge, but something in Dad's voice made me put down my pencil and pay attention. "What about Stefan? He's been coming around the house asking for money, says his business is in trouble and he needs a loan to keep the gym open." This was interesting. Stefan had always been proud of his financial independence, quick to remind everyone how successful his gym was compared to my blue-collar construction work. "How much money?" $50,000. Says it's temporary, just to cover some equipment loans and lease payments. $50,000 was serious money, the kind of amount that suggested Stefan's problems were bigger than a temporary cash flow issue. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I'd think about it. But Drake, there's something else. He's been asking questions about you, about the divorce settlement, about whether Dalia got any money, about your finances in general." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the same feeling I'd had that first night when I overheard Dalia's phone conversation. "Dad, whatever you do, don't lend him the money, and don't give him any information about my finances." "You think he's planning something?" "I think Stefan is desperate, and desperate people make bad decisions." After I hung up, I called Vic and asked him to do some digging into Stefan's business situation. What he found was even worse than I'd expected. Elite Fitness was hemorrhaging money. Stefan had borrowed heavily to finance the gym's expansion, taking out equipment loans, property mortgages, and even personal guarantees that put his own assets at risk. The membership numbers he'd been bragging about were inflated. Half his clients had stopped paying their fees, and new sign-ups had dropped to almost nothing. More troubling, there were signs that Stefan had been skimming money from the business accounts to fund his lifestyle. The Rolex, the designer clothes, the expensive car, all of it financed with money that should have gone to loan payments and operating expenses. "Your brother's looking at bankruptcy within 6 months, Vic told me over drinks at Murphy's Tavern. Maybe sooner if his creditors get aggressive. And he thinks I'm going to bail him out." "Are you?" I considered the question seriously. 3 months ago, I probably would have helped Stefan without question. Family loyalty, brotherly obligation, the natural instinct to protect someone you'd grown up with, all of that would have overridden my common sense. But 3 months ago, I hadn't known what Stefan was capable of when it served his interests. "No," I said finally. "I'm not going to bail him out, but I am going to make sure he understands exactly why." The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Stefan called me Thursday evening, his voice carefully casual in a way that immediately put me on guard. "Hey, big brother, want to grab dinner this weekend? It's been too long since we hung out." "Sure. How about Saturday night at Romano's?" Romano's was a family restaurant in the North End, the kind of place where we'd gone for special occasions when we were kids. It was also public enough to prevent Stefan from making a scene when I told him what I really thought of his recent behavior. Saturday evening, I arrived at Romano's 15 minutes early and chose a table in the back corner where we could talk without being overheard. Stefan showed up right on time, looking like he'd stepped out of a men's fashion magazine despite his financial troubles. "Drake, good to see you, man." He sat down across from me, signaling the waiter with the kind of imperious gesture that had always annoyed me. "So how's the bachelor life treating you? Getting back into the dating scene?" "I'm doing fine. How's business?" Something flickered across his face. Too quick for most people to catch, but I'd been watching Stefan lie since we were kids. "Business is great. Actually, that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about." Here it comes, I thought. "I'm looking at expanding again, maybe opening a second location in Brookline. The numbers look fantastic, but I need some additional capital to make it happen." "How much capital?" "Well, that's the thing. The bank is being conservative because of the current market conditions. They want more collateral than I can provide right now." Stefan paused, waiting for me to ask the obvious question. When I didn't, he continued. "I was hoping maybe you could help me out. Just temporarily, until the new location starts generating revenue." "How much, Stefan?" $50,000. I know it's a lot, but I'd pay you back with interest. Better than anything you'd get from the bank." I leaned back in my chair, studying my brother's face. He looked confident, successful, completely in control, which made what I was about to do even more satisfying. "Stefan, do you think I'm stupid?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you actually think I'm stupid enough to believe that your business is doing well when you're 3 months behind on your equipment loans and 2 months behind on your lease payments?" His confident expression cracked slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about. Elite Fitness is failing. You've been skimming money from the business accounts to pay for your lifestyle, and now your creditors are closing in. You don't want $50,000 to expand. You want $50,000 to avoid bankruptcy. Stefan's face went through several interesting color changes. How do you know about your financial situation? The same way I knew about your affair with my wife. I pay attention, Stefan. I always have. Look, Drake, maybe I wasn't completely honest about the expansion thing, but the gym really is a good investment. All I need is a little breathing room to get caught up on payments and what? You'll magically find a way to make a failing business profitable? You'll suddenly develop the work ethic and financial discipline you've never had in your entire life? The waiter approached our table, took one look at our faces, and quickly retreated. This isn't like you, Stefan said. You're not cruel. You're right. The old Drake wasn't cruel, but the old Drake also didn't know that his brother was the kind of person who would sleep with his wife and then ask him for money. That's not fair. Dalia and I, that was complicated. It wasn't about hurting you. What was it about then? Stefan was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his hands. When he finally looked up, his expression was different, less confident, more honest than I'd seen him in years. It was about feeling like I'd finally won something, he said quietly. Do you have any idea what it's like being your younger brother? St. Drake, who never makes mistakes, never fails at anything, never disappoints mom and dad? Is that really how you see me? That's how everyone sees you. The responsible one, the successful one, the one who has his life together. Do you know what they call me? Stefan, Drake's younger brother. Like I don't exist except in relation to you. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. So you decided to sleep with my wife to prove you could beat me at something. I decided to sleep with your wife because she was beautiful and available, and she made me feel like I was worth something. And now that she's gone and your business is failing, you want me to bail you out. I want my brother to help me when I'm in trouble. Is that really so unreasonable? I signaled the waiter and asked for the check. Stefan, let me explain something to you. When you slept with Dalia, you stopped being my brother. When you helped her plan to take me for everything I was worth, you became my enemy. And I don't lend money to my enemies. Drake, please. I'm not finished. You want to know what's going to happen next? You're going to lose the gym. You're going to lose your car, your condo, probably everything you own. And when that happens, don't come to me for help. Don't go to mom and dad either, because I've already told them about your financial situation. Stefan's face had gone pale. You told them? I told them everything. About the affair, about your business problems, about this pathetic attempt to get money from me. They're disappointed, Stefan. More disappointed than I've ever seen them. I stood up and threw enough cash on the table to cover both our meals. Good luck with the bankruptcy proceedings. I hear Chapter 7 is pretty straightforward these days. I left him sitting there, staring at the table, looking smaller and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. The next morning, I got a call from Vic. Your brother just tried to break into your house. I was at Home Depot buying supplies for a bathroom renovation, but I dropped everything and drove home immediately. I found Vic waiting in my driveway next to a police cruiser, looking pleased with himself. What happened? I was driving by around 10 a.m. and saw Stefan's car in your driveway. Figured that was weird since you were at the store, so I pulled over to check it out. Found him trying to jimmy the lock on your back door. Where is he now? Sitting in the back of that police car, waiting to be transported to booking. Breaking and entering, attempted burglary, probably a few other charges depending on what the DA wants to pursue. I walked over to the police car and looked through the window at my brother. He was handcuffed, disheveled, and looked like he hadn't slept in days. When he saw me, he mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." I turned away without responding. You want to press charges? The arresting officer asked. Absolutely. Stefan spent the weekend in jail before making bail Monday morning. By Wednesday, his story was all over the local news. Successful gym owner arrested for attempting to burglarize his own brother's home. The publicity was the final nail in the coffin for Elite Fitness. The few remaining members canceled their contracts, and his creditors moved to seize the gym's assets. Thursday morning, I got a call from my mother. Drake, your brother is asking if he can move back into his old room until he gets back on his feet. What did you tell him? I told him I'd talk to you first. Mom, Stefan made his choices. He chose to betray his family. He chose to destroy his business. And he chose to try to steal from me. Those choices have consequences. He's still your brother. No, Mom. He stopped being my brother the day he decided that sleeping with my wife was more important than family loyalty. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. What should I tell him? She asked finally. Tell him that some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. I never saw Stefan again. He left Boston 2 weeks later, reportedly moving to Florida where he had some distant cousins. The gym was sold at auction to pay his creditors, and his condo was foreclosed on by the bank. 6 months later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that he was working at a chain fitness center in Tampa, making $12 an hour and living in a studio apartment. It wasn't the ending I would have chosen for my brother, but it was the ending he'd chosen for himself. 1 year after my divorce was finalized, I received an invitation that made me laugh out loud. The envelope was cream-colored, expensive-looking, with my name written in elegant calligraphy. Inside was a wedding invitation for Dalia Harson and Marcus Webb, to be held at the Fairmont Copley Plaza in downtown Boston. Marcus Webb. I recognized the name. He was a partner at one of Boston's most prestigious law firms, recently divorced himself, with a reputation for representing high-profile clients in messy scandals. Apparently, Dalia had found herself a new target. What made the invitation particularly interesting was the handwritten note at the bottom. Drake, I hope we can put the past behind us and that you'll join us in celebrating our new beginning. Dalia. She was inviting me to her wedding. Either she had developed a sense of humor or she was planning something. I called Vic to tell him about the invitation. She's got nerve. I'll give her that, he said. You going? I'm thinking about it. Why would you want to put yourself through that? Because I'm curious. Dalia doesn't do anything without a reason, and I want to know what game she's playing now. The wedding was scheduled for a Saturday evening in June, with a reception to follow in the hotel's grand ballroom. I RSVP'd that I would attend alone, and spent the next few weeks wondering what I was getting myself into. The answer came 2 days before the wedding, when I received a phone call from Marcus Webb himself. Mr. Torrin, this is Marcus Webb. I believe you know my fiancée, Dalia. I was married to her for 8 years. I'd say I know her pretty well. That's actually why I'm calling. I was hoping we could meet for coffee before the wedding. There are some things I'd like to discuss with you. This was getting more interesting by the minute. What kind of things? The kind of things that are better discussed in person. Would tomorrow afternoon work for you? We met at a Starbucks in Back Bay, neutral territory that was public enough to prevent any unpleasant surprises. Marcus Webb was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, distinguished, expensively dressed, with the kind of confidence that came from winning high-stakes legal battles. He was also, I realized within 5 minutes of conversation, nobody's fool. Mr. Torrin, I'll get straight to the point. I know about your divorce from Dalia. I know about the circumstances that led to it, and I know about the settlement. Okay. I also know that Dalia has been less than completely honest with me about certain aspects of her past. I sipped my coffee and waited for him to continue. 3 weeks ago, I hired a private investigator to conduct a background check on my fiancée. Standard procedure for someone in my position. I can't afford to have my personal life become a liability for my clients. And what did your investigator find? He found that the story Dalia told me about your marriage, that you were controlling and emotionally abusive, that she left you because she feared for her safety, was completely false. Marcus pulled out a manila folder and slid it across the table. He also found this. Inside the folder were copies of documents I recognized, the recording transcript from that first night, the text messages Dalia had sent during our divorce proceedings, and the police report she'd filed claiming I was abusive. She tried to do to you exactly what she's been trying to do to me, Marcus said. The difference is, I figured it out before she could execute her plan. What plan? The same plan she used on you, with a few modifications. We've been engaged for 6 months, and in that time, Dalia has been systematically isolating me from my friends and colleagues, undermining my relationships with my law partners, and positioning herself to claim that I'm psychologically unstable. Marcus opened a second folder and showed me a series of emails and documents. She's been in contact with my ex-wife, feeding her information about my finances and personal life. She's been spreading rumors about my mental health to my colleagues. And she's been secretly recording our conversations, probably planning to use them against me in divorce proceedings. I studied the documents, impressed despite myself. Dalia had refined her technique since our divorce, making it more sophisticated and harder to detect. So why are you telling me this? Why not just call off the wedding? Because I want to do more than just call off the wedding. I want to make sure she never tries this again with anyone else. Marcus leaned forward, his expression intense. Mr. Torrin, your ex-wife is a predator. She targets successful men, manipulates them into marriage, then destroys them financially and emotionally. You were her first victim. I was supposed to be her second, and there will be others if we don't stop her. What do you have in mind? I want to expose her publicly, at the wedding, in front of everyone she's been trying to impress. I want to make sure that every potential future victim knows exactly what kind of person she is. I had to admit, It was an appealing idea. What do you need from me? I need you to attend the wedding as planned. I need you to act normal, like you're genuinely happy for her. And when the time comes, I need you to be ready to tell your story. And what's your story going to be? Marcus smiled, and for the first time, I saw something predatory in his expression. My story is going to be very simple. I'm going to explain to our wedding guests that I've discovered my bride is a con artist, and then I'm going to present the evidence to prove it. Saturday evening arrived with perfect June weather. Clear skies, warm temperatures, the kind of night that made Boston beautiful. The Fairmont Copley Plaza was decorated with white flowers and elegant lighting, and the guest list read like a who's who of Boston's professional and social elite. I arrived at the hotel wearing my best suit, carrying a small gift box that contained a crystal picture frame, the kind of generic wedding present that said, "I'm being polite, but not overly generous." Dalia looked stunning in her wedding dress, surrounded by bridesmaids and photographers, playing the role of blushing bride to perfection. When she saw me, her face lit up with what appeared to be genuine pleasure. "Drake, I'm so glad you came. It means the world to me that we can be friends after everything that happened." "You look beautiful, Dalia. Marcus is a lucky man." "Thank you. That's very sweet of you to say." She introduced me to several of her new friends, Marcus's law partners, society wives, the kind of people who moved in circles I'd never been part of during our marriage. Everyone was polite, friendly, curious about the ex-husband who was gracious enough to attend his former wife's wedding. The ceremony itself was elegant and traditional, held in the hotel's ornate ballroom with 200 guests in attendance. Dalia walked down the aisle on her father's arm, radiant with happiness, while Marcus waited at the altar looking like the perfect groom. The minister began with the standard opening. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of Dalia and Marcus in holy matrimony." But when he reached the part about, "If anyone has any reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace," Marcus himself spoke up. "Actually, I do." The ballroom went completely silent. 200 people turned to stare at the groom, who was looking at his bride with an expression I recognized. The same expression I'd had when I first learned about her affair with Stefan. "Marcus?" Dalia's voice was small, confused. "What are you doing?" "I'm stopping myself from making the biggest mistake of my life," Marcus said, his voice carrying clearly through the ballroom sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the dramatic timing, but I've recently learned some things about my bride that I think you should all know." He gestured to the back of the room, where a large screen had been set up for what everyone had assumed would be a slideshow of romantic photos. Instead, the screen displayed the first page of Dalia's police report from our divorce proceedings. 3 weeks ago, I discovered that the woman I was about to marry has a history of manipulating and defrauding the men in her life. The evidence is quite compelling. What followed was the most thorough public destruction of a person's reputation I'd ever witnessed. Marcus, with the skill of a prosecutor presenting a case to a jury, methodically revealed every lie Dalia had told, every manipulation she'd attempted, every scheme she'd planned. He played recordings of her conversations with his ex-wife, showed emails where she'd spread false rumors about his mental health, and presented financial documents proving she'd been trying to gain access to his assets. Then he called me to the front of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet Drake Torrin, Dalia's first husband and her first victim. Drake, would you mind sharing your experience with our guests?" I walked to the front of the ballroom, past 200 shocked faces, and took the microphone Marcus offered me. Dalia was standing frozen in her wedding dress, her face white with shock and humiliation. "Most of you don't know me," I began, "but you should know what kind of person you're celebrating tonight." I told them everything. The affair with my brother, the planned financial manipulation, the false police report, the systematic destruction of my reputation and relationships. I spoke calmly, factually, without anger or bitterness, just laying out the truth for everyone to see. When I finished, the ballroom was silent, except for the sound of people shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Marcus took the microphone back. "The wedding is canceled, obviously. The reception is also canceled. I suggest everyone go home and think about what they've learned here tonight." Dalia finally found her voice. "You can't do this. You can't humiliate me like this in front of everyone." "Actually, I can," Marcus said. "Just like you humiliated Drake. Just like you planned to humiliate me. The only difference is, I figured out what you were before you could finish the job." She looked around the ballroom, searching for support, for sympathy, for anyone who might take her side. She found nothing but shocked faces and disappointed expressions. "This isn't over," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "I'll sue you both for defamation, for emotional distress, for what? Telling the truth?" Marcus handed her a business card. Here's the name of a good attorney. You're going to need one, because I'm filing criminal charges for fraud, attempted extortion, and conspiracy. Drake might want to reopen his case against you as well. Dalia looked at the card, then at Marcus, then at me. For a moment, I saw something in her eyes that might have been genuine remorse, but it passed quickly, replaced by the cold calculation I'd learned to recognize during our marriage. Without another word, she gathered up her wedding dress and walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind 200 stunned guests and the ruins of whatever reputation she'd built in Boston's social circles. Marcus and I stood at the front of the room, watching her go. Think she'll leave town? He asked. Oh, she'll leave town. Probably tonight. Dalia's many things, but she's not stupid. She knows this story will be all over Boston by tomorrow morning. Good. Maybe the next guy will get lucky and hear about it before she can sink her claws in. I handed him back the microphone and started to leave, but he stopped me. Drake, thank you. I know this couldn't have been easy. Actually, it was easier than I expected. Sometimes the truth is the best revenge. I left the hotel and drove home through the quiet Boston streets, feeling lighter than I had in 2 years. My phone was already buzzing with calls and text messages. Word was spreading fast about what had happened at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, but I ignored the phone and focused on the road ahead. Tomorrow there would be questions to answer and stories to tell. Tonight, I just wanted to go home to my house, pour myself a drink, and enjoy the satisfaction of a job well done. Some construction projects take longer than others, but when they're finished properly, they last forever. This one was built to last.